finished the gigantic marathon that has turned out to be chapter 13 reading of Thomson, Bruckner. This has been whole 2 weeks, 1 week for this, and actually a little longer than a week for these sections because I'm actually making this video on a Friday afternoon, and normally I would have been reading in the next cycle. I would have started reading Bardo and Sherbert chapter 4 and 5, which is what I'm going to be doing next week. So there you have it, a long read of this chapter. Now, a lot of the content in this book is problems. It's the reason why I like it as a book for the Baby Rudin project. But still, it's been a lot of reading as well. I mean, yes, it is true. Trying to get to the beginning of it, it's roughly 100 pages in this book, and probably a good 60 or 70 are reading material. And so for the second half, the second week, I started in the tail end of contraction mapping, and I showed this before, and I'll show my notes. This is actually a great example of when a book has a really good example. It just rides you through all the different aspects of it as it becomes more, as the concept is laid out in more and more complicated examples. So the fact that you can take cosine of 1 and then the cosine of 1 and so on and so on and so on to get to 0.739, I think it is. Yeah, 0.739 is really, yeah, it just delivers the point. So it really made everything about contraction mapping, even when it involves integrals and differential equations, a lot more straightforward. So the systems of linear equations, an integral equation, a differential equation, all three, no matter how complicated the examples get, I just kept thinking back to, okay, no matter what, it's always that method. You're taking this function and you're constantly applying the same function until you arrive at your fixed point. So yeah, I finished that. And then some compactness, which I'm familiar with from other readings. And then the Heim-Borel property as well. Boundedness, the whole concept of total versus point. This applies to continuity, it applies to boundedness, and so, yeah. Then, of course, what I've been reading most of this week has been all about the Berry. Is it Berry? I'm going to call it Berry. I'm sure it's pronounced in a completely different way. Category theorem, eventually using the counter set towards the end. So a really great description of how you take nowhere dense sets and sets that are not nowhere dense, that are dense. So dense or nowhere dense. And so for nowhere dense, you can always find balls that leave you in isolated areas of the set. Yeah, so I'm going to go to my notes. And of course, I shouldn't have made so much noise by dropping that book. But of course, this chapter is all of this. So it's a total of 144, yeah, it's like 60, almost 60 pages of reading. And the part that I have been doing since the last video, so there's going to be 2 videos for chapter 13 reading, begins right here. And actually, the last time I did not show, I just sat down and did it, and I thought, it just rode the whole reading after that. And you should, if you've never done this, I recommend that you do it. You just take the cosine of 1 being in radians, not in degrees. Of course, cosine of 1 degree is almost 0. But cosine of 1 in radians will get you to 0.7. Then you take the cosine of that, and you keep going. And by the 15th time that you've done it, you're already getting to 0.738. And the book says 0.739. So really, if you did it 4 or 5 more times, you would just start getting 7.39, very close. You would just converge from that point. Drew it here. And so yeah, then after that, systems of linear equations or differential equation or integral, if that function allows you to have that behavior, then you get to the fixed point. back again to the compactness and the Heim-Borel property, complete metric spaces, the Arzela-Ascoli theorem, that K be a closed subset of the metric space of continuous functions between A and B closed set, then K is compact if and only if K is uniformly bounded and equicontinuous. So that requires its own definition. Yeah, and then down to the Berry category theorem. And of course, the way this chapter has gone down, there's not much to say except that I read it. It's gonna get a lot more interesting when I do a lot of problems. Cantor's argument again, the Cantor set, and then just looking at all these points where a line will cross a function. And of course, you can get to a function that the slope of the function is so steep that you can't really find any line that'll actually cross it. And so you put those two types in two different sets, and one is nowhere dense, and the other one is dense. So, and that proves all these theorems. And so there is chapter 13, the marathon, done.